Like, what is that? What is that someone in this life comes in with this ability to connect and come out of your own experience and body into another space, another energy? What is that?
Well, it's a mystery, isn't it? You know, you see it a lot. Actually, you see it in artists and performers.
Yeah.
Something comes through them that they can't manifest. Something even joyful and creative and very positive that in their whole lives they can't manifest at all. But
Mm-hmm.
when they're performing, it just happens. I think that has to do with how some people are born very sensitive and they just connect more naturally with
Mm-hmm.
something outside themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also think it comes through a certain degree of suffering that maybe you've worked through, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Uh, and also I think, this is getting maybe more mystical than I usually would venture into, but there is a truth, there's a larger unity, that there's a oneness that whether we know it or whether we don't know it, but we all belong to, and that can manifest itself through us, even if our conscious mind and even our personalities can't quite get a hold of it. I think that's what's going on.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I would agree. Is there anything that you do that gets you into that space more or allows for more of that to come through? A situation you put yourself in or a practice that you have?
I'm I'm not disciplined enough to have a regular practice. I mean, I really do have an ADD brain, it's a challenge for me to meditate or to do yoga regularly. For example, when I do,
I hear
but I
you.
don't keep it up as much as I know would be good for me. For me, that has come through psychedelic work, actually, um, which is not the same. I mean, as just coming to it more spontaneously. But that has put me in those spaces sometimes, and that's been helpful for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because I definitely want to ask you about that. Um, I've done it myself a few
Mm.
different times. Ayahuasca, psilocybin,
Yeah,
MDMA,
yeah,
varying degrees of healing tools.
yeah.
Um, man, is this the future of therapy? Is this the future of psychology and growth and meeting ourselves? I think that a loss of self is something you've said is a problem in society and what keeps us disconnected from
Right.
ourselves, that loss of self through the environment that we're in these days. So psychedelics essentially bring you back to that and go beyond it into spaces, my experience, that you didn't know were there.
Yeah.
Aspects of yourself, truths that you wouldn't have always otherwise known. So it seems like this could be a big healing tool moving forward.
Yes. So in this book, The Myth of Normal, I do have one chapter on psychedelics, which is probably appropriate. So out of 33 chapters, one is on psychedelics because I don't want to put my eggs all into the psychedelic basket. So,
Right.
like on the one hand, it can be very powerful. And the first time I did ayahuasca, maybe 12, 13 years ago, I just experienced this pure love that I'd never accessed before. I literally had tears of love rolling down my cheeks, and I thought I had arrived somewhere. Well, as my family could tell you, 2 days later, I had glimpsed something, but I hadn't arrived anywhere. So, and I've led retreats and I've helped people with psychedelics, and I've done, with myself. I think they're a great potential. I don't think they are the answer. I don't think they are the future. I think the future has to be far more with the transformation of people and of social structures and the culture itself. We can't rely on one particular modality. What the
Mhm.
psychedelics do is they show you great potential, and um, what shows up, as you say, is things you weren't aware of. It's almost like there's a membrane between our conscious minds and all the stuff we carry in our subconscious. And the psychedelics remove the membrane. It's almost like you can have a waking dream and experience all the rage, all the hatred, maybe, all the terror, all the fear, but all the beauty, all the love, all the oneness, all the unity, all the joy, all the presence that is in us. but be awake for the experience and be able to get in relationship to it. Psychedelics, I think, as you also suggest, I think, can put in touch with that unity that we're all a part of, but we're hardly aware of it most of the time. In fact, in this culture, which is all about competition and aggression, greed and acquisition, we are almost societally propagandized into forgetting that unity and that oneness and that interconnection. And psychedelics can open that up beautifully. But then there's the rest of life, you know,
Yeah.
and what you glimpse and experience in the psychedelic space. The question is how to make those same values, which people can attain without psychedelics, how to make those values work in our regular lives, in our social lives, in our culture. And that's a question that goes way beyond psychedelics, I think.
Sure. That's culture and society and the pattern they keep us in outside of ourselves that pull us back in so quickly. What do you think holds us back the most when we come out of that? Like we get into these spaces, we feel love, and then we get back into our routine. Like if there were a few things to change, what would it be? Like when you came back, what did you think this is what society pulls me back into the heart with the hardest?
I think there's two forces pulling us back into our ordinary, less unitarian, less connected self. One is just how our personalities are formed in the first place, which is very often, in my contention, the result of responses to traumatic events or traumatic pressures that happen to children in this society quite a lot. And so we form these defensive structures that we call the personality. And the personality doesn't want to give up too easily, because when stuff happens in childhood that makes you defensive and makes you afraid or makes you disconnected,
Mm-hmm.
those structures have been living in you and dominating your life, depending how old you are, for decades. They don't just disappear, they don't just dissolve. You might get a momentary respite from them in a psychedelic space, but they haven't all of a sudden evaporated. And the Buddha talked about what he called our habit energies. So our habit energies are the thoughts and emotional patterns and psychological structures that are ingrained in our brains and our nervous systems and our bodies, and they just reassert themselves almost automatically. Then there's society, which is all about how we look to others and what other people think of us and how we fit in and how we please others or how we compete with others. And then we go back into that world. And so it's no wonder that between the inner habit energies that have dominated our lives and then the external pressures, we quickly can lose the glow of that spiritual or psychological insight that we gained either through some spiritual experience or through psychedelics or with an encounter with nature, perhaps. So it's difficult to maintain that. And then above all, there's what my friend, the psychiatrist, Dan Siegel, calls the myth of the solo self. And like we all fundamentally, every ego believes that it's a unit, that it's a separate unit, sufficient unto itself, and we believe in our separateness, and this culture reinforces that belief, of course. So it's not an easy path.
Yeah, that brings me back to so I did a little bit of a hero's dose of psilocybin. I took 5 grams, and it took me to a really distant place, and I went really far away. But one of the main things that happened in the experience was that, and it was facilitated. This was with a facilitator, and was that I knew that being human wasn't real, but I wanted to be human.
Yes.
And so the first thing that I had to agree to in order to build constructs to get back to being human was I had to agree to the mind.
Yeah, that's right.
And I was like, great. Okay, perfect. Fine. Let's go. I want to see my family again. I want to see my dogs again. Because in the early part of the experience, I didn't know how I was ever going to be human again because I knew it wasn't real. And so yes, I had to agree to the mind, which for me felt like the ego. It felt like the stories. This was the lie because being human wasn't real. The mind was the lie, which is the stories and the ego.
Yeah.
Have you ever
And
experienced anything like that?
not personally, but I can tell you about somebody I talked to yesterday. You might know the name. Her name is Anita Morjani. Do you know that name?
No.
Okay, Anita Morjani wrote a book um, called "Dying to Be Me," and here was a woman who, no, in my view of illness as a physician, I've noticed who gets sick and who gets chronic illness and malignancy. It's people who really repress themselves in order to fit in with others, and that's
Mm.
a defensive response to childhood experiences.
Mhm.
Anita was one of these people,
Mm.
and she had this terminal lymphoma, stage 4 lymphoma. She was in a coma, and the doctor said, "This is in, you know, she lives in LA, which is where
Yeah.
I'm right." Um, she was in a coma, and the doctors were telling her family to prepare for her death within a few hours.
Oh my goodness.
And then Anita had this out-of-body near-death experience
Hmm.
where she saw her whole life, where she saw how she had never been herself her whole life. That's why the title of her book, Dying to Be Me. It took near death to make her become herself. But then she was in this realm where she could have chosen to stay there, but she had to make a decision. Do I stay there in this beautiful realm of unity and light, or do I come back into my mind and my body? And it sounds very similar to your experience.
Mhm.
She
I had that
decided,
choice too.
she said, I made a choice to come back. Now,
Mhm.
within 4 or 5 days, her lymphoma had disappeared, and within a few days, she was out of hospital, and she's never been sick since. Now, this is not totally unheard of, and I can sort of explain it in certain physiological ways. But
Mm.
the point is, she was facing that same choice that you had made, and she just decided to come back. Thank you for watching. You can get my book, The Myth of Normal, in hardcover, audio, or ebook by clicking the link below in the description. And thanks again.